quale per li seren tranquilli e puri discorre ad or, subito foco, movendo gli occhi che stavan sicuri, e pare stella che tramuti loco, se non che dalla parte onde s'accende nulla sen perde, ed esso dura poco, tale dal corno che in destro si stende, ai piedi di quella croce corse un astro della costellazion che lì resplende. Né si partì la gemma dal suo nastro, ma per la lista radial trascorse che parve foco dietro ad alabastro. Sì pia l'ombra d'anchise si porse, se fede merta nostra maggior musa, quando in eliso del figlio s'accorse. O sanguis meus, o superinfusa gratia Dei, sicut tibi cuibi sunquam celi janua reclusa,
background. And I just wondered if you could possibly read this as elegant, yes, but in a way almost too elegant. But part of the drama of it is that he sums up what actually the whole poem has been about in lots of ways. And yet it isn't the end. You know, there isn't a full stop there. There is a different angle to be addressed as the narrative progresses into the next section. So the unrolling of whatever God is actually there beyond whatever Dante is, however elegant he might be.
I think building on that, that's exactly it, because there's this kind of enormous compression of images, but because of that, the kind of unfolding of that incredibly concentrated kind of poem in a whole throughout the text requires kind of, I suppose that requires pause too, in the sense you need to kind of trace it through the text, think about how it relates to other things, think about how it might kind of unpack and summarise the text, and then follow it through the kind of text.
Is it just the idea of tracing the question? It seems to me that there's a tremendous amount of discussion within the canto about what you're supposed to do in that pause. I mean, he says explicitly that there's a sort of purpose, and that's to darmi voglia, give me desire. I don't know how you respond to this exactly, but there's what is supposed to fill that space is given to you as a sort of instruction, and that's kind of effective instruction. There's also, why is there this question here, and why is it? I mean, the rest of the canto is going to discuss a superfluous question. You don't have to ask this question, it doesn't need to be asked, but you should do it anyways, and here's a superfluous question right at the beginning. So both, I mean, the keys for reading this, the pause and the superfluity of that question are kind of what the canto wonderfully is about, I suspect.
Yes, please,
Well, I
Kath.
was going to say also, just thinking about what you're saying, Ryan, I think because the amount of sort of different cognitive tasks that he's asking you to do in a really short space of time, really asking you to be extremely agile, to do a lot of work. So you've got sort of the initial visual imagery. If you've come into this canto cold, as I know some of you must have done, then it's sort of, well, where's this coming from? You have to go back. You have to rehearse what's gone before. And I think that's sort of he's giving you time, but he's also making you think about sort of what you're doing as the reader, sort of where you are, how to engage with him. And I think that's one of the things that I think becomes also something that develops through the canto. There's more and more work that you can do, I think, even at the same time as you're being drawn into the narrative.
And just as a quick response to that, I think, and one of the things that I admit I don't know how to deal with exactly because I don't know what experience it would be, is this repeated demand that you should have this affective pull. I mean, he says later on, l'affetto e il senno, come prime qualità. So I mean, you have to balance your desire to understand what's going on with this, frankly, injunction that you have to be full of desire. And volition to, and then, but I don't, it's a hard.
It's actually, this is now moving into questions of medieval theology. Rather more complex than you suggest. For me, what I find most interesting about this canto is that on the one hand it wants to create this idea of harmony and perfection, of the state of beatitude, which itself it was, in theological terms, a hugely complex question, because on the one hand you've got sort of the Dominican tradition, which sees beatitude fundamentally as a type of intellectual satisfaction, and let's say a Franciscan tradition, I'm banalizing and reductively, that sees it in terms of a satisfaction as an effective satisfaction. Dante, throughout the poem, manipulates these two possibilities. And where does Dante stand in this debate between beatitude in intellectual terms, beatitude in affective terms? And we've got some of these issues beginning to be played out here in this canto. At the same time, what I find very kind of intriguing is that here's old Cacciaguida going around saying, oh, I'm finally satisfied because you've arrived. And it completely undercuts, and he doesn't do this once. He does it 3 times, possibly 4 times. There's a 4th instance where it depends how you interpret those lines. What's going on there? How do you return this to a kind of stasis of orthodoxy, if I may put it in those terms? Or are we to what extent is Dante raising questions about the nature of beatitude? Or is it an issue to do with the fact that in the end, because of those precise limitations that are dramatized in the diegesis, there's really, at one level, little point for us human beings to want to properly understand what beatitude may be, because it lies beyond any capacity that we have to understand. And so the fact that theology is going to be important, in a sense, or theological debates, even better than theology, is going to be important, it is made clear in the 3rd and the 4th tercet, both of which refer to issues of dispute in contemporary theology. One is, can the blessed intervene on behalf of the living? And then the next tercet, it's to do with how can it be just for a finite act of transgression be punished in infinity. Another major debating point.
Yeah, as one proceeds with the theological questions, I think one must, that Zig suggests, could I ask that one keeps in mind, I'm not going to stop and explain why I think one should keep in mind the fact that this is Mars, and that Mars is associated with music, and music is associated with a particular kind of harmony, which isn't just nice muzak, I think, but a proportioning. And theologically, this is going to work in terms of conceptions of what it is to be part of a divine order, which may not be simply fitting in Lego fashion with what God has designed. So this is something which I think can unroll following, but you probably want to get on to the next bit.
Yes.